What is up? What's going on? What's good? Here we are, May 9th, 2021. This is that particular thing here where we are about to step into the seventh season of the Boxing Source radio show. That's right. Been through 6 years, 6 years of doing this podcast, man. 6 years, man. That's right. First podcast was done in Las Vegas the day after Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao. Yep, that's right. And we have been doing a podcast ever since, talking about the sport of boxing. We've had multiple discussions over the years, have had interviews over the years, and now we're, just coming up on the seventh season of the Boxing Source radio show. And check this out, man. We are going to definitely get into it here for this particular episode, man. For those that are, listening in, thanks for listening in to this particular podcast. We are going to, just go over pretty much just one fight from yesterday. That's going to be the main topic here. That's been the whole thing about what's been going on this year. Ever since that particular fight between Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. You usually have a big fight around this time, Cinco de Mayo weekend of the year. And this year, even though we didn't have one last year, of course, because of the lockdowns, it was a fight that was scheduled to happen around this time last year. That's right. Canelo Alvarez versus Billy Joe Saunders, man. And this time it was going to be for the WBC, WBA, WBO, and Ring Magazine Super Middleweight Championships. Now, a year ago, both of these guys were going to fight at middleweight, but that wasn't necessarily the case here. So now you have both of these guys, they're at super middleweight, and it was a fight that few people were looking forward to going into this particular fight, even though that Canelo Alvarez was a fairly good favorite over Billy Joe Saunders. There were some people that felt like Billy Joe Saunders, with his boxing ability, his movement around the ring, would give Canelo a few issues in this particular fight. And Canelo himself said before the fight that he looked at and studied the style of Billy Joe Saunders and felt like it was going to be a difficult fight. He didn't say it was going to be a hard fight. He said it was going to be difficult. And with that being said, we went into this particular fight and, folks had some expectations. I had expectations of my own that almost came to complete fruition in this bout. But, let's, get into it here. As, we got Canelo Alvarez, like I said, he came in there unified champion, WBA, WBC, and Ring Magazine champion going into this fight. Billy Joe Saunders came in there with the WBO super middleweight title, was undefeated at 30-0. Canelo Alvarez had 55 wins, 1 loss, and 2 draws. Of course, the 1 loss to Floyd Mayweather, right? And it was, a battle that, it kind of like seemed if Billy Joe Saunders was going to be able to have much of a chance here, he would have had to been very active, one, and be able to affect Canelo with his shots. And we didn't see that within those first few rounds, even though he was trying to pump the jab there with his right hand, him being a southpaw, him also trying to have foot position and have his foot outside of Canelo's foot. Didn't happen in those first few rounds, but he started to adjust a little bit, started to move better within the, at the end of the third round and over to the fourth and the fifth round. So he started to get a little bit more success with his jab, while Canelo was just, coming forward, hands up, moving side to side, left and right, trying to get to Billy Joe Saunders to get him to the ropes. Because from the first round, you saw that Canelo Alvarez was just trying to get Billy Joe Saunders to the ropes and then wailing at him, throwing body shots, hard body shots. And after doing that, just trying to mix things up with his couple of combinations, his foot feints and his hand feints. And we saw like in the second round that Billy Joe Saunders felt the power of Canelo Alvarez right off the bat with the body shot. And that, he would have had to really think about getting up close to Canelo Alvarez to see if he would have any success on that. Now, within this particular bout, from the second, I'd say the second through the fourth and fifth rounds, you also saw Canelo's counterpunching game, come into play. And he was able to, land a couple of times there with, left hand counters and a few right hand counters, but he was also looking for, the uppercut, right uppercut there. You know what I mean? He was looking for that, and he was missing a good amount of times with the right-handed uppercut for the first few rounds of that fight. But you've seen that was the opening that he was trying to look for. But with that being said, you kind of like seeing Billy Joe Saunders have his confidence be up there a little bit within the fifth and sixth round. But by the time you got to the seventh round, you saw that the poise of Canelo was still, present there. He didn't seem, flustered. He didn't seem frustrated. He was still, keeping to his game plan. It was just that he wasn't, that active with his offensive activity. And, I kind of like wanted to see if Billy Joe Saunders was going to kind of like increase his offensive productivity there. But he wasn't quite able to do that enough, to the point where he could have, Canelo in trouble. And then the eighth round came up, and you just saw that Canelo was just throwing a few shots, and then he, landed with the right uppercut while Billy Joe Saunders kind of like ducked down, and that, did what it did to Billy Joe Saunders' eye. And when Canelo saw that, he was like, oh, man, oh, yeah, I got him now. I got him. And that's when you seen him playing to the crowd. You seen him with his arms up and everything like that and backing up Billy Joe Saunders and, just taking his time to try to dissect Billy Joe Saunders. And by the time the bell rang for the end of the eighth round, Canelo was like, yeah, I got him. And, pumped the crowd up. And you saw there with Mark Tibbs on the corner of Billy Joe Saunders saying like, hey, what went on there. And before the ninth round came up, Mark Tibbs waved off the bout. So it was a TKO victory for Canelo Alvarez. He is now the WBC, WBA, and now the WBO and Ring Magazine super middleweight champion, handing the first loss to Billy Joe Saunders. Now, just getting in here real quick, man, right off the bat, we got someone, one of our guest panelists joining us here. It should be from Atlanta, Mr. Mike. Mr. Mike, you checking in here?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Correction, I only live in Atlanta. I'm not from Atlanta. I'm from the beautiful, great state of Alabama. Shout out to Deontay Wilder. But yeah, man, I enjoyed the fight, even though it was eventually one sided. I enjoyed the fight. I did not enjoy the way sort of the announcers were against Canelo. I didn't enjoy how every bit of opportunity that they could have to favor Billy Joe Saunders that they chose to lean toward him. Like, you know, people are different in how they score. However, it was like certain rounds where Canelo would land big shots. I'm gonna go through my scores in a second, but I'm just kind of
Mm-hmm.
giving you my thought process. But certain rounds where he would land big shots, and literally you would see the body reaction and just how hard his shots were landing, and you just like, man, I'm glad that's not me, And you could just see, like from watching his shots early in the fight, I'm like, man, the end is near. That's just what I just felt in my mind, that this is literally going to be over soon. So, round one, I said Canelo won by the big body shots throughout the round, and you could just see that they affected Billy Joe Saunders. You could see oh man, wow, he does actually hit this hard. And so, shout out to Canelo and Team Canelo for understanding that we're going to stop him, because my game plan is going to be, I'm going to go to your body early. I'm going to slow you down. I'm going to make you very afraid to throw jabs, to throw anything, because what's going to follow, what's going to lead, what's going to follow is me throwing body shots. And that's exactly what the man did. He threw body shots. And, round two, I also gave to Canelo. Billy Joe Saunders was not throwing enough shots to overcome the heavy shots that Canelo was throwing. And so he seemed so affected by the shots that he was like moving across the ring from every big shot. And then he started to look a bit winded. Like he was, how somebody sort of is like too big into the moment?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be real. Sort of like how Deontay Wilder was in that other fight. Like it was probably a few things. It was probably some outside substance, but it was also that he was adrenaline wise too caught up into the moment. Just my interpretation.
Substance. I like that.
Yeah, the man, he's never looked like that. Looked very lethargic. Round three, I gave to Canelo again. Billy Joe Saunders' hands was at his side. He was reluctant to jab, very likely due to the counter body shots. And the shots he was throwing were very light. It was not enough to deter Canelo. I think you said this somewhere. But you gotta throw shots that at least make Canelo question if he's gonna continue doing that. Like to make him at least consider, should I do this? There was nothing in the first four, to truly make Canelo like reconsider, should I do this? And so
Mm-hmm.
Billy Joe Saunders was not like sitting down, which I'm not saying he should have sat down on his shots, but he was sort of like Paulie Malignaggi, where he would punch and then just not really plant his feet and just punch, unpunch, and then Canelo just like, that's it. You hit. I'll let you hit me on my head. I'll let you hit me wherever, because that's not doing anything. You can just see they were straight arm punches. You could also see that he was just like it just looked like he was, I ain't gonna say he was completely winded, but you could just tell the adrenaline was like catching up to him. Round four, I also gave to Canelo. Canelo throwing shots without much coming back in return. Billy Joe Saunders not sitting down on his punches and are mostly arm shots. And none of the shots he was really throwing was not affecting him. And to your point, he was not having enough volume to overcome that. So let's say he was throwing all them shots. He would definitely have to double 2.5 times shots to overcome Canelo throwing 10 big shots and then 7 of them landing, because them 7 big shots that he landed were like pretty hellacious shots. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And you could see the uppercut was just, he was committed. he was committed to throwing the uppercut, which stopped Billy Joe Saunders to think about it. Like, do I really want to keep doing this? Round 5, I gave to Billy Joe Saunders. He started letting his jab go, which allowed him to land them big shots. So it was that round where he first really started landing the right hand. And he was like, had his hands down, but he was, fighting from more distance and then sort of like making Canelo follow him. And when Canelo followed him, he would jab, jab, jab. And then, catching Canelo at the end of the jab, but then he would throw the right hand. He would throw 1-2 sometimes. And then he finally landed more shots to slow Canelo's offense down. So he was hitting Canelo with so many more shots that Canelo didn't really have a chance to hit him with shots. So round 5, Billy Joe Saunders. Round 6, I called it a tie, even though I favored Canelo. So both were landing good shots. Canelo's were harder. Billy Joe Saunders landed a few clean shots. I'm leaning toward Canelo with the hard shots. Like, Billy Joe Saunders threw shots, but if you throwing a similar number of shots and the other guy throwing harder shots, you're probably gonna give it to the guy throwing harder shots. But I call it a tie. Round 7, I gave to Billy Joe Saunders. He's I'm giving it to Billy Joe Saunders off him throwing more shots and landing more shots, but none were really heavy. Okay, nothing really heavy landed from Canelo, but it was still a close round. But Billy Joe Saunders just threw more, and Canelo didn't really land any, hellacious shots. Round 8, obviously Canelo landed the big right hand. Okay, so a bit of so Tyson Fury does this exact same thing where he punches. You remember I used to harp on this, or I hopped on that to say that if they fight again, Deontay Wilder has to do the feint, make Tyson Fury dump down to his right, and then punch him right what he did in that first fight where he actually got them 2 knockdowns or whatever knockdowns he had. Instead of punching over Tyson Fury's back, he has to feint him, make Tyson Fury make that move, jab, then feint maybe. Make Tyson Fury make that move, and then when he make that move, you catch him in that spot that he keep going to. Billy Joe Saunders has the same little, what we call it? Same, is that a deficiency? What would you call it?
It's a habit. It's supposed to be like a defensive maneuver, but it's more like a habit.
Yeah, so he has the same habit where he bends down to the right, and so maybe in round 2, in the first 4 rounds, Canelo was throwing the right hand, but it would go over Billy Joe Saunders because he would dip down, to the left or to the right, whichever way he was dipping down to. And so it would literally go over Canelo's back or whatever. And so you could see Canelo looking at that. And so literally what happened, Canelo, he threw whatever, and then Billy Joe Saunders tried to dodge it. And so when he tried to dodge it, Canelo threw an uppercut at the spot where he thought where Billy Joe Saunders continued to go to. And he landed the big uppercut. It looked like like a Street Fighter Hayuken type thing. Somebody showed me a Marge Simpson.
Yeah, that was our boy. That was our boy Matt with the Marge Master special.
Okay, the Marge Master special. But Canelo landed the big right hand. The thing that I will give Billy Joe Saunders credit for is because, we could tell that it could have definitely been an orbital bone, and quite naturally we've seen people how they react to that type of injury, and it's not, like that ain't something to like sneeze at. But after he threw the big shot, Billy Joe Saunders kept going, and he, even though Canelo threw a lot of pressure, it wasn't a lot landing on him. Like a lot of those shots missed him. So he threw a bunch of shots and he had a lot of pressure, but it wasn't really nothing to land clean after that first shot, after that first big uppercut. Like it may have been one shot, but it wasn't like enough to stop him in the ring. He looked across the ring, and Canelo did exactly what he was supposed to do, because in this moment, Canelo, whether he was just feeling it or whatever he was doing, that was the best psychological thing he could have done at that point. Because Billy Joe Saunders is questioning himself, man, what's wrong with my eye? Why my eye feel this way? Canelo like standing up. Canelo waving in the crowd. Canelo like, I'm ready. I am so ready. I don't want to sit down. I want to keep going. And if you down and you questioning yourself, and then the man across from you is like, let's go, keep going, crowd, come on. And then he holding up his arms like he man or something in the middle of the round. Literally, what's your option? Like you really that'll really make somebody question themselves. Like, I get it, you could call him a quitter, whatever, but psychologically, that's the best thing Canelo could have done, because that battle, even though it was physical, was also won psychologically by. I mean, he won physically, obviously, but the
Mm-hmm.
psychological battle was that you see the man over there like hot on fire. He like NBA Jam with the fire and stuff. Like, do you really want to fight that? You know that you ain't got much left. So he was like, man, I know my, and kind of is what it is. And so one thing that I will say, I do respect Canelo for showing a lot of pride to his country. I know he's more comfortable with Spanish, but I think part of him, in his prideful way, is to say, I'm going to answer these questions in Spanish because these are the people that I want to show that I'm still here for them, because they have always been here for me. The one thing that I envy in that is because he is praised for this. But when we have a black man, let's say Deontay Wilder, who caters to his people and speaks up to his people, a lot of people clown him and turn their back on him. If Deontay Wilder did that exact same thing, speaking to his people, which he did do it, that ring entrance that he did when he fought Tyson Fury, I felt something from it. I felt really empowered from that ring entrance. But you got people like, he too cocky, he this, he that. I mean, I'm gonna keep that coming to myself. But too bad, man. We can't support our black fighter like how his country support him. And I know it's culturally. I know this is a systematic thing that makes us not support him. But that shit kind of pissed me off, dog. That we can't support a fighter like that who has pride in his people. Why can't a man who have pride in our people, Deontay Wilder, get support from us like that? That shit pissed me off. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, it don't piss me off because I respect Canelo, and he's a top pound for pound fighter. He got to fight some. I'll let you say whatever you got to say.
I mean, we'll get on a thing there for Canelo, but in reference to the thing for Wilder, I mean that it's more of like I wouldn't necessarily say it's like a cultural thing, because like there are some fighters that have fans or more fans than Deontay Wilder has, and they're black too. Like, for example, with Terrence Crawford, you have a lot of Terrence Crawford fans, but the thing about, with Terrence Crawford is that I think people kind of like gravitate towards Terrence Crawford because of his overall skill level or whatever it is. But you really don't see Terrence Crawford like speaking on certain issues on a few things like that, especially recently, what's been going on over the past year and a half. With Deontay Wilder, it's like, and I've gone through it, multiple times through with Wilder, is that from my perspective is that the way that they have marketed him from when he just won the WBC title up until like 2017, 2018 was almost like a 180, because when he got into the sport, he got into a sport with a story that people could get behind, and they didn't, and I don't know why they didn't keep on that, but it just changed up and switched up on folks. And the way that he kind of like carried himself after 2017 turned a good number of people off. But going back to this thing here
How
with
was that though?
Canelo.
How did he carry himself? Just curious question.
Okay, so initially when he started his professional career, of course, he had this thing where, he had a brief amateur career after leaving high school, got into the Olympics, won the bronze medal. After winning the bronze medal, months after winning the bronze medal, he started his professional career, got a string of victories, He had a story, in reference to him, trying to, get enough money for his daughter in order to raise his daughter and, take care of his daughter and the, medical problems that his daughter had. It went through and it continued on past 2015 after he won the WBC title, actually through 2016. And that, people were starting to gravitate towards him more. But even with that, you really didn't see enough support for him at that particular time because think about it. Once he beat Bermain Stavern to become a world champion, that was the first American heavyweight champion in a while. You know what? Since Hasim Rahman. And you mean to tell me that they couldn't really put, all of their eggs in a basket with Deontay Wilder and kind of back him, you know? So you go through that first year, you go to the second year, 2016, and he had this whole thing there with Povetkin and whatnot. Then he had his fight against Areola, ended up getting, injured in that particular case, so he couldn't fight for the rest of that year. So my thing is like you have somebody that's an American born heavyweight champion and you're not sending them out there. You're not putting his face out to, different media outlets and things like that. You know, um and it took until after what happened in 2017 in order for his overall interest to go up. So going from that point until the present day, we kind of like we see what has going on with Deontay Wilder from that particular aspect. But going on your commentary for this fight between Canelo Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders, looks like you kind of gave Billy Joe Saunders just 2 rounds of those 8, which was like round 6 and round 7.
And a tie.
Oh, and a tie. Oh, okay. So 2 rounds and a tie. All right.
I think so, yeah.
All right. So that would be, shoot. That's like 5 rounds to 2 and 1 tie. 1 10 round. Therefore, Canelo Alvarez, which kind of like goes along the lines of what, the scorecards were. I think it was two scores of 78-74 and one score 77-75. But before I continue, I'm going to add someone else on here that it's been a good little while since he's been on the podcast. And I am surprised that he's on here, but very, very glad that he is on here. Introducing Mr. Give Me My Credit. World ranked. Is it world ranked in the building?
It's Mr. Give Me My Credit. Mr. Who You Pit. Mr. Boxing is a business. What's going on?
Oh, man, what is happening, my man? What's happening?
What's happening, man? Just chilling, man. This was a good opportunity to get on. I was able to catch it. You know what I'm saying? Scrolling Twitter. I know it's every Sundays. Sometimes I got other things going on. I'm just happy to be on now. What's going on?
Oh man, just chilling and getting it in, man. I'm about to, we about to dissect what happened last night. Had the summary of what went down between Canelo Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders. Had Mr. Mike with his round by round analysis. He gave Canelo 5 rounds of the 8. He scored 2 rounds to Billy Joe Saunders, and 1 round was even. There before we saw Canelo basically crush the orbital bone of Billy Joe Saunders before the start of the 9th round, which kind of like irked me a little bit because I was calling it for about a week and a half that eventually Canelo would break down Billy Joe Saunders and end up getting a stoppage in the 9th round. I said Canelo TKO 9. But Mark Tibbs just said, he said after the fight that he didn't like what Billy Joe Saunders was saying there after the end of the 8th round, so he didn't send him out there for the 9th. So that's why on the record it's a eighth round TKO victory for Canelo Alvarez there. So World Rank, what was your thoughts on that particular fight and the performances of both of those fighters?
So because I'm Mr. Give Me My Credit, anytime I get credit or give credit, I want to give you credit because even though it was at the end of the eighth round, you got it spot on. So I gotta give you credit for making that prediction because you was right on. About the fight, I mean, Saunders was getting into the fight, sixth, seventh round. He was getting into the fight. I had it scored 5-3. So I can understand the aspect of Canelo up. I cannot understand anybody who believes Saunders was up. It seemed like he was getting this groove, but Canelo was always landing the harder shots. He was always being composed. So even though Saunders was getting to the fight, at no point did I think that Saunders was winning the fight. He was just being competitive.
Bird. So you're saying that like Saunders was like, competitive at times, during different points of the fight, right?
Yeah. So J Rock on Twitter, he was like, J Rock Williams, former 154 champ, was like, Saunders was doing some good things in there, but Canelo was just buying time. He was never bothered by what Saunders did. And I think he was right on. He was spot on. Canelo was basically in control of the fight the whole time, even though Saunders was, again, doing some good things. Canelo was in control. And, when he landed, I forgot what shot that was. But when he landed that, you can visibly see Saunders' body language and everything change. From that point forward, he was done. There was nothing else he can do. He knew that he was done for, and he was just on his bike for the rest of the round. And pretty much that was it.
Yeah, and I kind of like thought that going into the fight, you seen Billy Joe Saunders with a little bit level of confidence, or I think the commentators were saying like he had like a little bit of swagger and things like that. But that's just Billy Joe Saunders being Billy Joe Saunders. He kind of like has that swag, or sometimes people would say a smug attitude, given the things that he's done in the past. But once he's been in there one round or two with Canelo Alvarez, and you kind of like see the power that Canelo Alvarez has, then it makes your whole game plan, be kind of like thrown off a little bit.
Everybody got a plan till they get hit in the mouth.
Yeah, that's what Mike Tyson said. Listen, everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the face, right? But with Saunders, it was like you say that going into the fight that we have a 20-foot ring, we need to be a 22-foot ring or a 24-foot ring, and Canelo's like, no problem, man, no problem. It could be 22, it could be 24, doesn't matter. I have enough ability and enough skill to be able to get to you and to break you down and everything like that. And my thing with Billy Joe Saunders is that some people kind of like point to his performance against David Lemieux and say that okay, he has a foot movement and he has that type of skill to not be at the same place, but that's against guys that aren't necessarily at that elite level. Canelo is an elite fighter, and it doesn't matter what type of skill you might have. If you don't have the overall package that comes close to where Canelo does, then he's going to eventually get to you and he's going to break you down. And you saw that from early, that no matter how large the ring was, Canelo was able to get to Billy Joe Saunders, get Saunders to the ropes, and be able to send a message, be like, look, actually, he kind of like did the same thing with Saunders early that he did with Callum Smith, is like either he'll land to the body with his shots down there, or if Saunders was blocking it, his arm was going to feel how hard those shots were going to be. And I think that some people don't like point that out, is that you could have some type of weapon or whatever it is, whether it's your left hand or anything like that. Like with Saunders, he's a southpaw, so Canelo's just gonna say, "Hey, I'm just gonna come after you, and I'm going to throw hard body shots, and either your body is gonna take that shot or your arm is, and I'm gonna make it to where you're not gonna use that left, that left hand." And for a good amount of time, you didn't really see Billy Joe Saunders throw that left hand until like the fourth or fifth round, because every time Canelo was throwing those shots, whether it landed or not, Saunders felt that power.
To be fair, though, there was a left to the body left. I don't know if that's a hook or I don't remember exactly what the punch was that Saunders landed, and it was a beautiful two piece combination, and it had literally no effect on Canelo. And like you said,
Mm-hmm.
Canelo, his mentality now going forward is, yes, you guys can probably be more fleet of foot than I am, but over 12 rounds, you're just not going to be built enough to be able to withstand me coming hard towards you, and like you said, landing body punches for 12 rounds. And recently, there hasn't been many people who've been able to uh, not only survive but put a constant offensive, um, I guess, offensive display towards him. So
Mm-hmm.
you can get the Amir Khans for 3 rounds, or you can get Saunders and spots landing good punches, but over a long period of time, the truth stands out. And Canelo seems to always be able to wilt these opponents down either by force or by skill.
And shout out to Canelo for understanding a basic framework, like game plan framework, and how like you base all of your rest of your offense on. So okay, I can say sort of jab, but he bases it off, a semi jab, but then the body shot, and that is something that he takes a very consistent approach in the early rounds, and then he got away from it when Saunders started like letting his shots go. But shout out to him for at least having that like framework and sticking to that, and that is successful. You look at Andre Ward, you look at anybody who starts with the body, and then how they typically fare in these fights. Shout out to Canelo for that and team.
Yeah, I mean the thing with Canelo and his guys there, his trainer Eddie Reynoso should have the chief second there, Chipper Reynoso, for just sticking with this game plan, and that not just going off that plan. And to go off what World Rank was saying with Billy Joe Saunders, like he did catch Canelo with a left hand. I think it was either a right left combination or it was like a double left, like one to the body and then one upstairs that Canelo just took, and he just walked right through it. And going to what I was saying at the beginning there, man, if you don't have the power or enough power or the activity to have Canelo respect you, then he's just going to continue to walk forward and walk through you, and then eventually just break you down. And that's what we, saw here in this fight, with Billy Joe Saunders. Even though, he Canelo had his, little time over a couple of rounds where he wasn't as active with his offense. He just didn't. I guess he just didn't feel like there was something that Billy Joe Saunders could do that would really have him in real trouble. And so that's why he kind of, took his foot off the gas a little bit in those sixth and seventh rounds. And then in the eighth round, he was just, calm, calculated, and concise with his, attack pattern. And when he, cast in with that right uppercut, that was it. And you saw like he was really, boosted up because, before the fight, him and Eddie Reynoso was saying, look, it's going to take 7, 8, or 9 rounds, but we're going to, go ahead and get that stoppage victory over Billy Joe Saunders within round 7 through 9. And that, that plan came to fruition there for Canelo Alvarez. And, it was a, pretty good performance by him. I thought that, Billy Joe Saunders, kind of, I think he underwhelmed in a sense because, going into the fight, it was supposed to be okay. This is the biggest fight of your career. In higher profile fights that you've had against the likes of an Andy Lee or Chris Eubank Jr. or David Lemieux, you were able to, do more than people expected you to do. But going into the fight, like people kind of like saw you be like going up against the guys like a Chef at a Sufi or a Charles Adamu or Artur Akovov or something like that. And if you don't have that type of level of competition going into a fight against Canelo Alvarez, you're not going to, be there where you have the overall skill set or the overall drive to kind of like take it to another level like Canelo does. And I saw that early on is that you seen that Billy Joe Saunders just didn't have it in him to take it to another level. Like you got to be like balls to the wall or something like that in order to do something against Canelo Alvarez. And I didn't see anything where he kind of like, said, let me go ahead and take a risk. Because if your original plan ain't working, then you got to do something else. And that something else usually takes risk. But if you want to win a fight, that's something that you might have to do. And I didn't see that there with Billy Joe Saunders.
I think sometimes guys are okay with being competitive and not really going beyond what they are known for. So Saunders is known as a decent boxer, and he's not likely to put himself more at risk for the sake of really winning the fight. Now, and like you said, you have to do that for the most part in beating some of the top opposition. And for me, this is again another prime example of Canelo being an elite fighter facing a world-class fighter, where they don't have the next level to be able to, even if it's power, even if it's the gas tank, it's the chin, it's always something that would hold these fighters from being elite, where someone like Canelo has the whole package. He has the chin, he has the stamina, he has the power, he has the offensive display. He can even has pretty good defense, very improved defense actually. So
Right.
when you have all these aspects, and when you get to an elite level, what you do great sometimes isn't good enough. You have to have, like you said, a second gear or something else up the sleeve. And a lot of times these guys, I'm going to stay with what brought me to the dance. And sometimes these guys have to live with that. And I think Billy Joe is one of those fighters where he's a good boxer, but he needed a little more to be able to be competitive with Canelo.
So to that point, even though I don't feel this is the same as Terrence Crawford's unification undisputed run at 140, will this sort of be looked at it like that, to where he never faced competition that truly had a chance to compete with him? And I mean, he's gonna win the accolade, right? So you got to give him that. But will that be sort of an asterisk on it, because it's like you were never in a 50-50 fight or 40-60 or anything like that,
I mean, according to most people, the Kovalev fight to a lot of people was a 50-50 fight. I truly didn't believe that. And I even said it on this show, but there are people who believe, a lot of people actually, who believe Kovalev was a legitimate challenge to him.
What people? Casual fans?
No, there was a lot of course I can't pinpoint per se, certain people, but there were a lot of people that believed Kovalev was going to be competitive because of the weight difference or because of the power. in that fight. There wasn't a lot of people who thought that fight was going to be a walkover.
I got you.
Now, going off that Kovalev fight, for how that Kovalev fight went through, there was like some times when Kovalev looked like he had the upper hand over Canelo with how he was kind of fairly consistent with his jab. But like I said here with Billy Joe Saunders, you didn't see a second gear within Kovalev that made Canelo be much in trouble. So that when Canelo answered Kovalev with his offense, you didn't see something coming back from Kovalev. And that's how you ended up having Kovalev being taken out. Another example to me was when Canelo fought Daniel Jacobs. Like within the first 4 rounds or so, from a technical standpoint, it was a pretty good battle. But by the time you got to the second half of the fight, you saw Canelo take it up a different level, and that his stamina and his skill level were enough to get him through that fight, where Daniel Jacobs just didn't have enough offense and enough, energy within him to just say, let me take this up a notch. It wasn't like how he fought Gennady Golovkin. He took it up a notch against Gennady Golovkin because he had the energy, he had the momentum within him that say, hey, yeah, I could hang with Gennady Golovkin, but hey, I could also show that I could beat Gennady Golovkin. Against Canelo, you didn't see that.
The big shots coming at him made him rethink that.
Yeah.
Canelo make everybody rethink throwing shots at him. Everybody not named Mayweather. Well, Mayweather counted, but and avoid it. But you get what I'm saying.
Now, I have a question about the Mayweather and Canelo, I guess, fight, because I'm starting to think that as we start to get further and further from that fight, Floyd is going to get less and less credit. Like you already hear the people that say, Canelo wasn't in his prime. To me, I also would say he was closer to his prime than Floyd was.
Right.
But there's a lot of people who say he fought Canelo before. And I'm starting to think like, I'm seeing people say, hey, Canelo is the best fighter this generation. I don't know how far, in terms of generation, if you're talking current generation under 30, no doubt. But when you're talking about generation, I don't know how far that goes back. But I'm starting to think people starting to take Canelo, and he is a great fighter. He's no doubt about it, a great fighter. But it seems like people are starting to not excuse the Floyd fight, but it's like it's just not the same career. I don't know what's the best way to put it, but it seems like people are getting further away from giving credit to Floyd for beating Canelo.
I mean, the thing is, that's a different time. He get a pass because if you are going to do that, the time to do it the same way when what's the boy who beat Matrix, who getting his money, $6 million?
Your boy Teofimo.
Teofimo. If Teofimo had lost, it would have been okay because he still could have had a sort of second career. I mean, Canelo has had one career, but you get what I'm saying. Like it's not a big deal because what have you done for me lately? That's why. That's exactly why. What have you done for me lately? That's why it doesn't matter. That's why nobody cares about. I mean, we care about what Manny Pacquiao did, but what have you done for me lately? Terrence Crawford, we care about what he did at 140, even though he fought lesser competition. But what have you done for me lately? What are you doing now? Like, yeah, you can't sit on those laurels. Andre Ward, when he was in the game, yeah, you won the Super 6 and you are the man. But what have you done for me lately? And he showed, and he left when he was supposed to leave after he showed what he was supposed to do with Kovalev when he was supposedly the boogeyman. What have you done for me lately?
Yeah, and the thing with what World Rank said, um, in reference to the thing with Canelo and Floyd, right? And people talk about Canelo being too green or whatever it is, but if we go back to that time period, 2013 was September 2013, right? Floyd Mayweather came into that bout undefeated with a record of 44 wins and no losses. Canelo Alvarez came into that bout undefeated with a record of 42 wins, zero losses, and one draw. He was a professional at 15 years old and went through his bouts over in Mexico for a long time. But when he got in there and he stepped up in competition, he stepped up to the plate. And his previous bouts before going up against Floyd Mayweather was against Ryan Rhodes, Alfonso Gomez, Kermit Cintrone, Shane Mosley, Josecito Lopez, and Austin Trout. Now, given those last four fights, the amount of experience that those four fighters have in between them should have just showed, like, hey, if he didn't have that many issues with many of those guys, even though we had the whole thing about the Austin Trout fight, but he was able to get through those fights and win those fights. So if he wasn't ready for someone like Floyd Mayweather at that particular point, when was he ever going to be ready for Floyd Mayweather? Especially if Floyd Mayweather wasn't in his prime at that particular point. And he wasn't. He wasn't in his prime. He wasn't at his optimal weight class. He wasn't at no 147 or 140. No, he went up to the 154 to fight somebody in Canelo Alvarez that was around that 154-pound weight class and did what he did. And people just want to go ahead and say, oh, but you had Canelo Alvarez there and he was 23 years old. But he was a professional for 8 years. So what else could anyone else say at that point?
That's crazy because when you look back at Floyd's career, you never hear that excuse when people talk about Castillo. And that's a fight that he officially won. You never hear people say, oh, well, Floyd was this or Floyd was that, because it seemed like so many people want a loss on his record. Oh, they always bring up the Castillo fight. But it seemed like we want to erase, and when I say we, you just saying in a general sense, we want to erase Canelo's loss to Floyd. And this wasn't like a close fight. Floyd whitewashed him. And I'm not saying we should always bring it up that Canelo lost to Floyd, because it was a time ago, but we still have to acknowledge that greatness is greatness, and we can't just try to. It's the same thing that goes back, and I'm not a fan of any fighter per se, but it goes back to the kind of the Lomachenko thing where ESPN tried to take that loss off his record. Like
both of them.
Yeah, you can't be trying to deceive people by switching up things and trying to go with the narrative. And again, I'm not trying to say Canelo's not an all-time great fighter, because he is. He's done things that Floyd hasn't done. But to just try to erase like that didn't happen, I'm not a fan of that.
Right. People just want to have some type of revisionist history when it comes to what happened in September 2013, and that just can't happen. But it shows like how many people are against a certain fighter having the legacy that he has. And it's not just the whole thing with the Castillo fight, but it still goes on since May 2015 on what happened with Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. Like, people still haven't been able to let that go. So that's the thing with the whole thing about Mayweather. But going to Canelo, and like you said, with the overall accolades that Canelo has had, over the past few years, being a middleweight champion. He was unified middleweight champion. Now he's a unified super middleweight champion. He's been the WBO light heavyweight champion. And now he's, one step closer to saying that he could be the undisputed super middleweight champion. And that is, kind of like the fight that he's planning on having next is against the IBF champion, Caleb Plant. And, Caleb Plant looks like he's, there chilling. He got, his wife there, Jordan Plant, and all of that. Um, and I'll get to him in a little bit, but I got to go into, of course, what was happening after the fight between Canelo Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders. You have the press conference there in AT&T Stadium. Man, Canelo is answering questions here and all that. And you have the WBO middleweight champion, Demetrius Andrade. And he's like, hey, great performance. I'm a fan of yours and, everything like that. My question to you is, when are we going to fight? When are we going to get it on? And Canelo, says, man, you ain't fought nobody. And then they go back and forth, and of course, everybody's jumping on the whole thing with Canelo saying, "Get the fuck out of here, man! Get the fuck out of here! Like who you fuck? Get the fuck out of here!" And my thing was, after the whole back and forth went on, and we seen that Demetrius Andrade was trending on Twitter, right now. A lot of people want to get on Demetrius Andrade and have the same so-called quote unquote thoughts that Canelo had, that Demetrius Andrade hasn't fought anybody. Well, here's my thing. Rocky Fielding, Callum Smith to a level, Billy Joe Saunders to a level. Yeah. Abney Yildirim. Okay. What is their resume? Particularly with Abney Yildirim, because I know that, a couple of y'all are, familiar with how Abney Yildirim became the opponent for Canelo Alvarez. And the thing is, Abney Yildirim did not have one eliminator bout to become the WBC mandatory contender. His last fight was a technical decision loss, if I'm not mistaken, to Anthony Durrell. And he hadn't had a fight since. So how is it that you become a mandatory without no eliminator bout, no final eliminator bout? And it was circumstantial because of David Benavidez showing up overweight for his fight that he had, so he couldn't defend that WBC belt. So when Canelo fought Callum Smith, it ended up being for the WBC title along with the WBA. But you can't, as Canelo, you can't tell someone in Demetrius Andrade that should have had his fight against Billy Joe Saunders for the WBO middleweight title, but Saunders, had his nasal spray issue, and tell Demetrius Andrade that he hasn't fought anybody. That and now you see like people trying to jump on Andrade's case. Of course, you had the Charlo brothers try to jump on his case or whatever it is. And I'm like, well, all of these other guys that Canelo has fought recently don't really have that much of a resume themselves. So how are you going to complain about Andrade when you don't complain about these other guys?
Has Andrade fought anybody, JR?
Who?
Has he fought anybody?
Andrade?
Yeah.
Well, if you go through his,
I'm an asshole. I'm sorry. I'm an asshole.
I know you're kind of joking with it, but
I'm sorry, Jay. I'm an asshole. I'm sorry.
But I mean, you kind of get where the whole thing is. But I wanted to point out something though with Canelo and Andrade, right? Now, we go back to 2019, right? 2019, Canelo Alvarez fought Daniel Jacobs. and it was at middleweight. And he had the WBC and WBA titles at that particular point. Daniel Jacobs had the IBF title. He gets the win over Daniel Jacobs to have 3 of the 4 major titles at middleweight. He could have had the opportunity to become the undisputed champion at 160 pounds, but yet didn't happen. Now, if y'all know me, and y'all know the fighter that I dislike the most in boxing, who claimed for a while that he was trying to go after all the belts, and he never did. But in this case, Canelo had his chance to go after all the belts at 160 pounds, and he didn't do it. So, how are you going to go after Demetrius Andrade now when you had a shot to fight Demetrius Andrade in 2019 and you didn't do it? You see? So, that was my initial gripe about what Canelo said.
Now you talking my language, so and I posted this on Twitter. Like, I don't get how these people like Andre. Okay, let's take it. He didn't fight anybody, which he didn't, which is a valid point. But if you're gonna sit here and you're gonna fight Yildirim and you're gonna fight Fielding, these guys are not the level of Andre as a fighter. Don't even have Andre has no resume. Yildirim has less of a resume. Fielding, he's a UK level fighter. So if you're giving these guys opportunity, and nobody's really crying about that, they'll say, "Oh well, Canelo's taking the tune-up. It's okay." But why are we trying to draw the line with Andre? Why is Andre the line? Why is it not Yildirim? Why is it nobody speaking out to say, "Oh, we don't want to see the Yildirim fight"? You know, we got no interest in it because of whatever reason. Yes, Andre could be boring. He could be considered a boring fighter. But I think I even said it on this show. What's the difference between Andre and Plant other than the belts in the style matchup aspect of it? To me, there is no difference. Plant's style is equally as boring or could be as boring as Andre's style. I don't see a difference in the styles. Now, if you want to take the approach of, oh, we want all the belts unification, then okay. But don't draw the line with Andre when you fighting other guys who are less of a level than him and then say he didn't fight anybody. You didn't tell Yildirim that. You didn't tell Fielding that. So why do you want to draw the line with Andre? That's my issue.
Now, here's the bonus thing too, right? While Canelo was going through that back and forth with Golden Boy, and he was able to work out that deal to get away from Golden Boy and still have his own contract, right? You mean to tell me that he couldn't have a little, even if he needed a little bit more time, and he didn't have to fight on December in Madison Square Garden? You could have given him more time to go from where he was at 175 back down to 160 and still have that fight with Demetrius Andrade for those belts, because he still was regarded as the world champion with the WBC, the WBA, and the IBF at that particular time, so that he could go ahead. Well, actually, not the IBF because of the whole thing with Derevianchenko. So let me take that back. But he could have still fought Andrade and said, you know what? He is the clear-cut number one, without a doubt, best dude in middleweight, and could have just went ahead and given Demetrius Andrade that one loss and been done with him. But that didn't happen. He went ahead and he said, you know what? I'm going to just go with 168, and I'm going to just have my plan to stay at 168 pounds, So, that was my thing. Well, actually, let me take that back, because the Fielding fight was actually before the whole thing with Jacobs and Kovalev. So his first fight after Kovalev was the thing with Callum Smith. So he could have had his shot to go back to middleweight after the Kovalev fight, but he chose not to do that.
And I'm pretty sure if Canelo said meet me at 168, I don't think Andre would have a problem meeting him at 168.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I don't think so either. I mean, he like the and we know how the things are with fighters. They get to a certain weight when they're not active, and then once they go into camp or once they get close to getting ready for a fight, that's when they cut their weight down in order to get to whatever they need to get to. So with someone like a Demetrius Andrade, he's probably around that 168 range when he's not active. We know like fighters like the Charlo brothers are more of like 180, 185, 187 or something before they get down to 160 or 154. So yeah, you could have had Canelo versus Andrade at 168. That could have happened outside of the whole thing with the Callum Smith. But at the same token, having Andre do that is kind of like telling me something where, and this kind of goes towards Eddie Hearn to a certain extent. Like, how are you not doing, your job with someone like Demetrius Andrade? I know that some people say like Andrade is, okay with having these particular fights against, the Artur Akovovs or Liam Williams or somebody like that, but outside of that, how are you not working towards having him fighting Gennady Golovkin? If you can't get him to fight Canelo Alvarez, how come you're not getting him to fight Gennady Golovkin?
There is no doubt in my mind. He's telling them. I think he's giving them the option of Andre, but I also think he's telling them like, there's no money in that fight. Why would you? I don't think he's straight out saying why would you want to take that fight. But he's saying Andre's out there. I know he's presenting. I can assure you that he's presenting Andre, but he's not presenting Andre in a manner that he would present another opponent. So he'll say Andre's out there, but you got bigger fish to fry, or there's more money in this fight. So I think he's presenting Andre, but he's not presenting Andre as a person that he really wants to get that fight. Hey,
that would be attractive.
I got so many other people that I gotta, Andre just came new on the board to Matchroom. I still, I had to get Callum Smith his. I had to get BJS his. I still gotta look out after Canelo to a certain degree because now I'm starting to, kind of be in this clique, trying to work with him. And so he's presenting Andre, and then he's going back and telling Andre, hey, these guys don't want to fight you. So, what can I do if these guys don't
mate, listen, mate, he don't want to fight you, man. I'm like, look, I've tried to get the fights, but they just don't want to do it. But my thing would be like this. You mean to tell me that someone that wasn't necessarily a full-time guy with Matchroom in Daniel Jacobs was able to get a co-promotional deal to a certain extent with Matchroom Boxing and still was able to get himself a fight with Canelo Alvarez? But you sign with Matchroom full-time and you can't, necessarily get him to fight. It's almost like, so I wouldn't say it's to this level, but it's kind of like the whole thing with Bud Crawford trying to get his fights over there at 147. But it's kind of different with Demetrius Andrade because, like I said, you got guys that are there within 160 and 168 that are within your promotional banner, and you can't have Demetrius Andrade fight any of those guys. That should say something.
I don't know that it does. I just think that Andre is the type of fighter that people perceive as not bringing nothing to the table. And I think everybody knows that from the public perception, from the promoter perspective. And when he's with Matchroom, he's on the back of the bus. And because I think Jacobs was signed with Matchroom before Andre, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, a little bit before, yeah.
Yeah, and I think what Hearn did with everybody, even BJS, Jacobs, everybody, I think he promised them Canelo. I don't think he promised Andre Canelo. I think he told him, hey, this is a chance you might get Canelo, but I think he promised all these other guys that they were getting Canelo. and that's why I think he delivered for them as opposed to Andre. I don't think he's ever promised them that you're getting Canelo.
Which goes to their management team's ability to broker a deal. He just got a bad deal. They got probably guarantees, like you said, to do that. He didn't ask for it, so there you go.
Absolutely, I think he even in his deal with who he was promoted with before that, Jimmy Birchfield and them. Andre has never been promoted correctly enough. He's always been with like secondary guys, and now he gets with Matchroom and they just push him back. Hey, there's too many guys in front of you. You know you got to wait your turn, and he might not ever get his turn. For whatever reason he made wrong decisions in terms of who's backing him, and I think that may have cost him most of his career.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was definitely with like secondary guys, man. When you're with who is this dude? Art Palulo or other guys like that. Like that, yeah, that doesn't quite work, Like he wasn't like fully with, the bigger guys over the course of his career, not like the Golden Boys or anything with Tom Brown or Lou DiBella or anybody like that. you know. So you're kind of like with more of the secondary or third tier guys when it comes to promotions and stuff like that. So you're not put in that position to have the fights that could have been readily available to you. And going off of his previous thing where he could have had the fight lined up with Jermell Charlo at 154 pounds, and that kind of like fell apart. That that kind of like I think that turned off a good number of people that were higher up in the boxing business, and it's kind of been tied to him ever since. But one of the things that I was unsure about when it comes to Matchroom is if Billy Joe Saunders got on with Matchroom before or after Demetrius Andrade, because I was thinking that he got on after Demetrius Andrade, but I'm not too sure about that.
And Andre, I think, like you said, the Charlo fight was a big one, and also the cancellation of the Billy Joe fight. 2 instances where he's making a step up, and somehow both of those fights don't happen. And I always wonder what his career and what Terrence Crawford's career would be if, let's say, they're with PBC. I think they get the opportunities that they're missing now. It's not totally on them. I mean, they chose, whatever is beneficial for them. But I always wonder what would be their career if Andre or Crawford had signed with PBC.
They would get more even competition than they're getting now.
I agree.
Yep, they would. And it would have been, even with the thing with Crawford, that would have been, even at 140 pounds, imagine Terrence Crawford at 140 pounds over in the PBC. They would have got something done for him where it would have been a little bit more lucrative at that particular case. But even at 147, like, he would have so many possibilities there.
I'm going to speak to a point you just made. If he was at PBC, the likelihood of him being undisputed at 140, and I ain't talking about Jose Ramirez in their era. I'm talking about Danny Garcia, Tim Brantley at 140. The likelihood of him, he could probably beat Tim Brantley, but I mean, and Danny Garcia. But you get what I'm saying. The likelihood of him being undefeated now is the chances go down a lot. And undisputed.
Yeah, but we would truly know his level. Like not that we don't know his level, like he's a good fighter, but in terms of where he really stands in against other good competition. I think he definitely would have been tested with one of those, the Porters or, Garcia. He would have got, somebody very meaningful than what he's got up until this point.
Adrian Broner.
Well, Rank, you told the truth. We don't know his level. You told the truth.
Adrian.
We don't know his top, his level at the top. We know he's an A fighter, but where in that? Is he an A minus, A, right. A plus?
Absolutely right.
Looks like We have to see if World Rank will be able to reconnect on there. But yeah, the point there with Terrence Crawford, I mean, look at the possibilities of the fights that could have been made at 140 and 147 at that particular point. And if we look at Crawford, I mean, he's been there at welterweight for a good little bit, ever since 2018. So he could have had those fights, against the likes of Danny Garcia or even a Lamont Peterson. He could have had those type of fights there within 147 or 140. Not just the Danny Garcias, but the Lamont Petersons, the like who else was out there? I would say maybe even like I said,
Matisse
Adrian
maybe.
Broner at 140.
Matisse at 140,
Yeah, Lucas Matisse.
which is a different Matisse now. I mean, this would have happened to Matisse anyway if he'd have stepped up. But I'm just saying, it would at least been more like the aura of danger at 140.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the thing about it is that we don't necessarily know where Terrence Crawford would be at if he was able to have those type of fights. And I kind of saw it with the case of Tim Bradley too, because remember, Tim Bradley had the opportunity or the chance to sign with, as far back as it was, Golden Boy. And if he was with Golden Boy, he could have fought like a guy like Amir Khan, which was the fight that was being talked about at that point. And Amir Khan, or a Danny Garcia, or anybody that was out there 140, or 140, 147. But he chose to go ahead and sign with Top Rank at the time, which got him that Manny Pacquiao guarantee. And so you kind of seen, what was going on at that particular instance. World Ranked is there back with us. I'm gonna see if I could get someone else on here to talk about a couple of topics.
Can I say a comment on that one on Tim Bradley?
Go ahead.
Tim Bradley made the right choice for himself. If you got the route to fight Manny Pacquiao or Floyd Mayweather, you choose one. And Tim Bradley did right by himself in his career. Switching over offered him a lot of uncertainty. Going and fighting Manny Pacquiao 3 times, that's the right choice in any answer, whoever you are.
Mm-hmm.
I can't fault him. I mean, yeah, he didn't fight Mayweather and then like that, but we know he would have lost. But I'm just saying, it's the right choice.
I agree. He had, even with the Marquez fight, they treated him kind of like an A-side. And I'm not sure if he'd have went with somebody else, they'd have treated him the way that he did. Even in that bad decision he got against Pacquiao, he was still treated. He even had pay-per-views where he was the lead. And I didn't think Bradley was per se a good, a ticket seller, but he was the head of some good pay-per-views. He had some good fights. Top Rank actually did him well.
Yeah, I kind of felt that way. With Tim Bradley, they were able to, navigate and manage his career fairly well. When he was there and he signed with Top Rank. I mean, 3 fights with Manny Pacquiao. He had his fight with Juan Manuel Marquez. He had his fight with Ruslan Provodnikov, among multiple others. Where if he had made that decision to sign with Golden Boy or whatever it was at that particular point, it wouldn't have been a guarantee. Of course, it wasn't a guarantee that he would fight Floyd Mayweather, but he probably would have went through those guys like the Amir Khans, the Marcos Maidanas, the Lamont Petersons, the Danny Garcias, and at that particular point of his career, would that have been a better decision for him?
He beat Lamont Peterson. He beat Lamont Peterson.
Well, he beat Lamont Peterson before he got to the point where he was at 147. So
I actually think that Amir Khan fight was signed before he had moved over. Like, that fight was scheduled to happen. And then I think Amir Khan ended up facing Danny Garcia, I think. But I think that Bradley Khan fight was signed, and then Bradley moved over right then and there. But Bradley's 140 run was really good, but he was not the star that he became at welterweight. His 141 was damn good. You know,
Right.
the unification with Devin Alexander. He had some the Peterson fight. He had some good wins, but he wasn't a ticket seller. He wasn't some. Even the Junior Witter fight was Kendall Holt. He had some pretty good fights, but he
Much
wasn't.
better than Terrence Crawford.
Huh?
Much better than Terrence Crawford. Sorry for cutting you off. I just wanted to say that. Much better than Terrence Crawford.
Yeah, much better than Terrence Crawford. So he had a pretty good run at 140, but he wasn't getting that shine until he got with Top Rank.
Let's see. Like you said, Junior Witter, Edna Cherry, Kendall Holt, Nate Campbell, Lamont Peterson, Luis Carlos Abregu, Devin Alexander, Joel Casamayor, basically.
Like between him and Danny Garcia, maybe throw somebody else in there, but that's a pretty fucking good run. And Danny Garcia had a pretty good run too.
Yeah, both of them had damn good runs.
Yep, they sure did. At 140, and the thing is, like on the flip, you had the thing there with Terrence Crawford, and you see the guys that he's fought. Yeah, he's had the thing there where fought Julius Ndongo, he fought Postal and who else? Felix Diaz, whatnot, and John Molina Jr. But like after that, there really is.
Adrian Broner beat John Molina Jr., which I'm just gonna leave it there. I'm not gonna say nothing else other than that.
And you can even go further with even Josh Taylor. If he beats Ramirez, his run has been pretty damn good too.
Oh yeah. Like he has his win over Postal, he has his win over Regis Prograis. He'd have his win over Ramirez. Like, yeah, some people would put Josh Taylor up there as far as like his run. And there are a few people like right now that feel like wherever they put Josh Taylor in the pound for pound, that they feel like they're selling him a little bit short, because of the level of competition that he's faced there at 140 pounds. So, that kind of like, goes into it. But back on the whole thing with the Canelo joint, like him being like a pound for pound number one. And some people like kind of like say he's pound for pound number one, and there is a serious gap between him and who else is, next there in their list of pound for pound fighters or whatever it is. I know with World Rank, you don't really necessarily do stuff for pound, but I want to get, something from Mike before, I see if I could add someone else on that will kind of like go a little bit more in depth of the quote unquote greatness of El Campeon, which will give y'all a clue of who it is.
You want me to talk about him being the pound for pound number one?
Yeah.
I mean, he is. Like, my definition of pound for pound is who have you fought? Who have they fought? How do you look when you fight these guys? There's no way you can fight a guy who at one time we thought was something, and then he goes and we find out that barring an injury, barring something like world changing, but we find out that he isn't who we thought he was. And you base some accolade, some historical accolade off of some span of guys that are not as good as we thought they were. That's not a case for pound for pound. Canelo has fought the who's who in boxing, even if he did fight him where he had an advantage outside of Floyd Mayweather. Even if his Floyd Mayweather lost, it adds to his pound for pound greatness because the man learned a lot in changing his style. He adapted his style. He knew from that point on his way to win, whether you're good or not. I mean, this get me to this point. He know that his recipe for winning has to involve going to the body. But it leads to the point, when is he going to fight another guy that is 50-50, 60-40, 65-45, because that hadn't happened in a long time. And so, yes, he is pound for pound number one based off of his in-ring current accolades, based off his historical accolades. But when you look at the Rocky Fieldings, the tall dude who wasn't that good again, like he don't get a kudo for that one because that dude wasn't that good either. I go to that. What have you done for me lately again? Like, you're pound for pound number one, but come on now, Canelo, some gotta shake here. You need to fight somebody else who we at least think they can win. Like if he beats a Charlo or I don't put Andrade in there. Andrade ain't that good to me. No offense. Andrade has probably less of a chance to win than Caleb Plant, in my opinion. Charlo, who else could challenge Canelo?
Better BF is the only other one.
Better BF, yes, because at least there's the allure of heavy shots, and you're fighting somebody bigger than you. They could literally knock your head off. Like outside of them two, I just can't give Canelo all these I mean, I can give him kudos because he deserved it, but like, what have you done for us lately? Like even Billy Joe Saunders, he's good, but he's not a world beater. He's whatever world rank said.
All right, so I gotta jump in quickly before you get the next person on. So,
all right,
a lot of the points that you make definitely make sense, but what I would say is compare him to anyone else. If you compare him, when you say a 50-50 fight, okay, so let's go to Crawford. When was the last time he was in a 50-50 fight? When was it? Okay, you like Inoue. When was the last time he was in a 50-50 fight? Canelo has been in more competitive fights than those guys on I guess what you thought of what the fight was prior to the fight happening. So yes, we can say that Canelo needs, some of these guys are not as good, but he mixing good guys as well. Where's Crawford's mixing? Because it's the same level of guys. Where's Inoue's mixing? It's the same level of guys. Yes, Inoue beat some very good guys at smaller weights, but he's not facing the top of bantamweight right now. So these guys have been going with years without fighting elite guys. So if we're comparing them to Crawford or Inoue, it's not really no comparison because those guys aren't facing better competition either.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I personally don't think it's worth my time. Like, why am I wasting my breath to even mention them? Because I feel the same way you said, and I feel like things like that shouldn't have to be spoken. But, that's why I didn't even mention that, because it's like the only person I got to legitimately criticize is Canelo. If Andre Ward was still fighting, there would be some claim for a pound for pound. But other than that, I mean, okay, the Charlos now, either one of them, they are coming. I mean, they're not on Canelo's level, but I think that they strong number 2, number 3, one of them.
Now, I don't know about the thing with the Charlos, man. Like I said, I think the only one that could have the percentages closer to 50-50 against Canelo Alvarez at this point is Artur Beterbiev. And I have a little setup how that fight would be kind of like promoted sometime in 2022. But I wanted to
Errol
get this
Spence
person on.
is my number 2. I'm sorry. Errol Spence is my number 2. I had to clarify that. I'm sorry.
I have to think about that one. All right, here we go. Now coming up on the line is the number 1 Canelo fan in the planet, El Campeon. We know him as the president of the Deontay Wilder fan club, but he is the emperor of the Canelo Alvarez fan club from MVO, Mr. Matthew Brown. What's going on?
Hola, amigos.
¿Cómo estás, señor?
Viva Mexico, cabrones! Yo, I I I had to sit and listen to this fucking Mike Grady guy hating again. He was like begrudgingly trying to give Canelo credit. He can't do it. It's like it kills him to admit that Canelo is the Don Dada of boxing. Like
Matthew Brown, you only heard 5 minutes of the conversation.
I
You
heard
didn't hear the
enough.
rest of the conversation.
I heard enough. I heard enough. Listen, here's what we. Well, I gotta take Canelo to task a little bit myself. I'm not gonna lie. I did not like the energy that he had towards Demetrius Andrade. Um,
Yeah, we called him out on that. Oh yeah.
I'm the kind of guy that I want to see Canelo go on an ass whipping tour. Oh, you talking shit? You could come get some too. You talking shit? You come get some too. I don't like the you're a horrible fighter. Who have you
Get the
fought?
fuck out of here, man. Get the fuck out of here. You're a
Yeah,
horrible
like,
fighter. Who have you
and it's
fought?
just so crazy to me that he's laughing and he ha ha, talking about who have you fought right next to Andrade's promoter. So if Canelo's asking who has he fought, he should be directing that question towards Eddie Hearn. And,
And
and
Eddie
I
Hearn
don't
should have
get it.
given him an immediate answer because he recently fought Liam Williams.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what's funny? Eddie Hearn is the reason why Andrade hasn't fought anybody. Eddie Hearn kept Andrade from accepting the deal to fight Charlo on Showtime. He's the one that decided to say, "Hey, you resign with me, I'll pay you so and so to fight this guy." He's the one that let Andrade fight the Luke Keelers of the world. So now when Canelo, your shiny new toy, is asking who has this guy fought, that is an indictment on you being able to deliver fights for Andrade as his promoter.
Now, before you got on, we had a fairly extensive conversation on that when it came to Demetrius Andrade. And I gave, of course, two clear examples of where Eddie Hearn was able to deliver for a few fighters, but didn't deliver for Demetrius Andrade. Recently, of course, Billy Joe Saunders. Before that, you had Callum Smith. And before that, you had Daniel Jacobs. So if he was
Don't
able
forget
to
Rocky
deliver for
Fielding.
those three,
That was also Eddie Hearn's fighter, Rocky Fielding.
yes, great. This is a great fight, Rocky freaking Fielding, man. Rocky Fielding. Not Rocky Johnson, not, I don't know, Rocky Boyman who played football or whatever it is. Rocky Fielding. So you mean to tell me that you could get fights for these guys against Canelo, but you can't get it for Demetrius Andrade? Now,
Who
Demetrius.
has Canelo fought since he's been at the zone? Remind me. He fought
Oh, okay. Let's see.
Fielding.
The zone. Rocky Fielding was the first fight. Then it was Daniel Jacobs. Then you had Sergey Kovalev. And then, of course, he had the whole thing where he was supposed to fight Billy Joe Saunders, but that got delayed. So it ended up being Callum Smith last year. Then you had Avni Yildirim and now Billy Joe Saunders.
So basically, out of the 6 fights he's had on the zone, 4 of them have been Eddie Hearn matchroom fighters, but none of them are Demetrius Andrade. Wow. Wow.
Had you been here earlier, you would have
That's
heard us
crazy.
speak on something very similar to that.
That's just crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I would go to one of the lines on a fairly famous song, these are the breaks. But when it comes to Demetrius Andrade, man, it's kind of like a half and half because Andrade, he's been under the thing with with Matchroom, and this is actually a worse situation between with Andrade and Eddie Hearn than when we had the whole talk about Devin Haney and Eddie Hearn and how Devin Haney hasn't been able to get those fights, notable fights, while working with Matchroom.
Well, here's the thing. Um, the Charlo fight was the fight. He shouldn't have turned it down. It wouldn't have been on the zone, but he would have gotten a big fight. So then when Canelo said, "Who have you fought?" Hey, I fought Jamal Charlo. You know, how would Andrade look if he was unified at 160 WBC and WBO?
Well, but here's the other thing too, and I kind of like touched on this to a certain extent. There was another period when Canelo could have fought Demetrius Andrade, but it goes into the whole little thing where Canelo had that, the interest of going up to 175 while he was still under Golden Boy. Um, because they had the whole thing where he had most of the belts at middleweight, but he could have had one of the last belts and went for undisputed. But they had the whole thing going down between Canelo and at the time Derevianchenko, who was the IBF mandatory. So with Canelo's team, Golden Boy there, Eric Gomez fucking up. That's how he got stripped of the IBF belt. But they could have went ahead and said, "Hey, let's present this Andrade fight to you." I didn't really see much of an interest then, you know. But outside of that, when it comes to Andrade and his side too, and you talk about the thing with Eddie Hearn, and you talk about the Charlo fight, I don't even have to touch the Charlo fight. You're working under Matchroom, and there is another champion under Matchroom Boxing right now that's working with Eddie Hearn by the name of Gennadievich Golovkin. And there has been no mention of them making a fight for Andrade to go against Gennady Golovkin. What is up with that?
Well, Golovkin don't want to fight nobody
Of course
unless
he
it's
don't.
gonna be like he's only willing to risk it against Canelo because of the amount of money he gets to fight Canelo. That's it. He's not gonna fight nobody. This guy's talking about fighting some
Ryota?
Brazilian
No, right
guy,
there.
Esquivel Falcao. Like,
Oh, that foul. Oh, yeah, that's right. What Esteban? What Emilio Estevez or
it's
what?
like,
What?
come on, man. This dude,
I'm sorry, man, but yo,
we know Golovkin ain't fighting nobody. So I don't even know why you even mentioned him. It's like my whole thing is this, right? If Eddie couldn't get or didn't want to pay or let Andre go to Showtime to fight Charlo, why didn't Eddie lean on his relationship with Keith Connolly and pay to have Andre fight Derevianchenko? Why'd you let Charlo be the one to fight Derevianchenko?
like I said, it's one of these similar relationships that Eddie Hearn had with Devin Haney. Like if you're really serious about doing the work for some of these guys, you would put them in a position to have the best fights available, for them to have the most lucrative fights available and be there in the spotlight. But with some of these guys, it's just not happening. And for some reason, these fighters are sticking with them, you know. So that's why with Andrade, it's kind of like a flip of the coin as far as like my opinion of the whole situation, because there's some instances where he should have been able to go for some fights, and then there's other instances where if you try to push for a certain fight, that Eddie Hearn's blocking it. But with Andrade, you also had the whole thing of what he said on another show in reference to him not fighting Charlo on Showtime. and why he ended up passing on that deal. So world rank, you on there, you had something?
Yeah, so there's every promoter has guys that they got and guys that they really fuck with or that they really are looking out after. And Andre is one of those guys who Hearn thought as a afterthought, even though he's a world champion, this is not a prize guy to grab in Eddie Hearn's stable. This is just somebody else. And I give you a prime example of how it could work. We can go back to the Luis Ortiz situation when Hearn signed Luis Ortiz. He had no real reason to sign Ortiz, and he didn't really use Ortiz other than to keep Ortiz away from Joshua. Or you can look at Rashidi
No, I
Ellis.
disagree with that.
Or we can look at Rashidi Ellis' situation with Golden Boy. There's no reason really why he's not getting fights, but he's not getting fights. So every promoter has certain guys that they have in their stable that's not a priority. And Andre just falls under that for Matchroom. It's not a thing of these guys are not being presented these fights. It's just that Andre is not someone. Again, we go back to the conversation of he's telling them, "Hey, Andre is an option," but he's not promoting Andre to the fact, "Oh, you should face this guy." And that go back to what Matt was saying, where it's the money situation. If Eddie Hearn presents Andre to Triple G, there's really no reason for Triple G to fight Andre other than title or whatever belt Andre has. But other than that, you don't think Eddie Hearn is telling him this is not really a reasonable fight for you. You can wait for Canelo, and we'll just give you some tune-up fights until then. There's no real reason for these guys to get in with these guys, and these promoters don't really care enough about these guys to make it a priority that these happen.
Well, it's almost like the whole thing where you have this so-called Canelo sweepstakes. Cue the Price is Right music. Come on down. You have a fight with Canelo Alvarez or something. You know what I mean? And for some reason, Demetrius Andre's been sitting in the audience and he hasn't been picked, and he's been there in the audience every single day for like 4 years straight, and it hasn't been picked.
Yeah, but he one thing I will say about Andre is at least he's not putting his career on hold waiting for Canelo. I respect that about him. You got a lot of these guys that's just sitting around waiting for a Canelo payday, and they're not really trying to make no moves. I just feel like Andre has a promoter that's not interested in delivering the fights for him, and that's basically what it is.
Not putting his career on hold is relative because he ain't fought nobody. So is his career like really moving, or is it like?
Well, he's been staying busy.
Yeah, at least he's been doing that.
Okay.
And he's making good money at Matchroom. It's just the quality of the fights is not there. Like, I don't understand. You turn down the Charlo fight. You don't get the Derevianchenko fight. Why hasn't he fought Danny Jacobs? Why hasn't he fought Callum Smith?
Well, you know why he ain't fighting Daniel Jacobs.
Yeah, but that friends and family bullshit, that's gotta stop.
Yeah. It's gonna go out the window, huh? So, oh man, so there's like two fighters that I see right now at middleweight that could be fighting Demetrius Andrade later on. That would be the best possible fights that he could have
Which
at
two?
160. One, I don't think is going to happen, and that's Chris Eubank. The second is the current top rated contender for the WBO title in Jaime Munguia, and that's it.
I think the Eubank fight could happen. It's the Munguia fight I don't see happening.
I think Eubank is more likely than the Munguia fight too.
Wow, interesting. Then what in the world would Munguia do after his fight that he has coming up? Because he has pretty high rankings there in middleweight with the WBC and WBO.
Yeah, but
So,
Munguia already turned down the WBO mandatory.
oh
That's
shit.
why Liam Williams was
Being
given a
Williams
chance to
was
fight for it.
Oh God. And what in the world is Munguia gonna end up doing then? Then what's the point of him being in middleweight?
Well, here's the thing. I think what's happening is Oscar doesn't want to help any matchroom fighters. He's just waiting until his contract expires so he can take his entire stable to Triller.
The Triller.
Yeah, that's all it is.
Oh my God! And if it, well, the thing is, they really didn't have much of a budget at the zone anyway. So it's like, what's the point, of having that many fights there at the zone at this particular point in time? But geez, like, oh, Andre's just gonna be mad stuck right there, man. But yo, Matt, since you're on, I want your assessment of the performance of El Campeon against Billy Joe Saunders, and if you still have your thoughts about Billy Joe Saunders now, given the updated news that we've had
And
of his condition.
before he answers, I want to say you can't clown me about watching this undercard because it wasn't worth watching anyway.
Oh boy.
That was a horrible undercard, by the
I was
way.
about to say you better give me something. Okay, thank you, man.
Like it's actually a shame that such a massive event on such a massive stage with that big of a crowd was subjected to one of the worst undercards that I've seen in a very long
time. And the craziest thing is that the last fight card that I covered, and what was that? Of course, it was one of those, the leap year day or whatever, when they had Mikey Garcia against, of course, Rick the Model Martel as the main event. That undercard was miles better than what we saw last night.
Honestly, they should have just paid PBC to move the whole Andy Ruiz card to Canelo's undercard.
Oh man, they would have been going nuts.
I was just thinking that.
Hey, nah. Actually, you know what? No, they shouldn't do that, because if they would have done that, then we probably would have seen 7 fights happen in the crowd instead of just 5.
Did you see Billy Joe Saunders' father get roughed up by security? Could have happened to a better guy. But on Canelo's performance, the dude is just on another level, man. He was beating Saunders in every round, landing the harder punches, the cleaner punches, doing the body work, setting traps, and then he hit him with that Marge Simpson uppercut from hell that cracked his whole shit open. And that's when you saw Canelo start celebrating, like before the round was even over. He knew that Saunders was done. And Saunders knew he was done. And Saunders, for all the shit he talks, he is such a bitch. Quitting like a bitch. Crying in his towel. They even had to cut to an ambulance to show Saunders getting taken to a local medical facility like I was watching an episode of Monday Night Raw. Get the fuck out of here with that. Good riddance. Good riddance.
But you got to give props to his promoter for at least trying to save face for him. Like, no matter what people say about Eddie Hearn,
promoter props, because his promoter is the same guy who claimed that Daniel Dubois was faking his eye injury and he demanded to see x-rays. So fuck his promoter and fuck Billy Joe Saunders.
Is this the same Billy Joe Saunders that had choice comments for a Mr. Daniel Dubois?
Yep. That man said that he would have to be carried out of that ring before he quit, before he takes a knee. Well, he didn't take a knee, but his knee sure was bent on that stool while he was crying like a little bitch.
Damn.
So I got to give him props though, because he at least went through the full round and didn't take much punishment to that eye after that
Because he
initial
was
shot.
hugging. He was hugging him. But if you look at his face after Canelo hit him with that uppercut, he looked like, wow, I really fucked up now. That's the face that he made. He looked scared. He was a bitch. You know, and this guy, all this gypsy warrior, blah, 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 as soon as things got tough, he quit. Okay? You've only seen things get really tough for him one other time in his career, and that was against Chris Eubank Jr., and Billy Joe Saunders was holding on for dear life in that fight too. But this time, he fucking quit. He showed that he ain't got that dog in him. He ain't never had that dog in him. And I actually hope that the gypsies kick him out of the fraternity. They gotta tell him to turn in his trailer park or caravan, whatever the fuck they use.
The traveler license.
He's not allowed to be a traveler no more.
Hey, speaking of Chris Eubank, before I started this thing, I saw his IG stories when he was reacting to Billy Joe Saunders being near the stool. He was like, "Look, he quit, he quit, he quit."
This motherfucker was in a dentist chair.
Yeah, yo, he was. Hey, I don't know what he cashed in on that bet. I guess that he had again.
10K,
10K,
not bad.
10K. That's not a bad pull. But man, yo, that
Who did he bet?
something.
Who did he bet?
He bet on
against
Canelo.
Saunders.
Oh, to for the stoppage.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, and he kind of was like on there for that. And well, going back to you, Matt, you pretty much say you hope that this is the last fight of Billy
Yep.
Joe Saunders' career.
I don't want to see him again. You see people starting the rumor, oh, his career may be over because he shattered his cheek. Good. Shit. They want us to feel sympathy for him. This is the MTK Global like they're trying to rehabilitate Billy Joe Saunders. Yo, in the words of Stephen A. Smith, we don't care. We don't care.
Yeah,
All right.
you had that thing playing. I'm here to tell you right now, we don't care. We don't care. Oh man. Oh, but I mean, it just kind of goes into this thing here with Saunders, man. Like he was able to get finagle his way to a fight against Canelo Alvarez, and like I was saying, man, I tried to call it on the dot all week, man, and I know World Rank gave me credit for it. Even like I said, I thought it would be 9 rounds. It would be stopped in the 9th. They stopped it before the 9th. I just felt like Canelo was just going to break him down, and that Saunders was going to eventually fold, but he folded off of one punch. He folded off of one punch, but you kind of like seen hints that he knew once he felt that first body shot.
Second round, uppercut to the stomach.
Man, it was definitely the first round.
he knew that he was just in it against somebody who was elite. And he had all of the talk leading into the fight. Oh, I'm not going to fight if it's a 20-foot ring. Canelo said, okay, I don't care. It could be 22 or 24. But once we get in the ring, I'm going to get to you. I'm going to find you, and I must break you.
Yep. He beat the hell out of him. And it was great to watch. You know, Billy Joe Saunders for the whole, he's like a master boxer and all this stuff. He didn't throw not one jab to Canelo's body the entire fight. You know, his punch variety was trash.
It
You
was
only land
zero.
6 body
But,
shots the
but
entire fight.
but it goes back to the overall skill level and strategy of Canelo. He did the same thing to Billy Joe Saunders that he did to Callum Smith, in that, yeah, I'm going to go to your body, but if you want to make the decision to try to block that shot to the body, I'm going to hit your arm and I'm going to hit the hell out of it. So if you even think that you could try to get off on me with your left hand or your right hand or whatever it is, you're not going to have the power that you think you have behind that left hand, Billy Joe Saunders, because I'm going to continuously hit that left hand and make you have second thoughts of even throwing it.
Yep.
That's why you didn't really see any left hands from Billy Joe Saunders until like round 4.
And when you did see it, it was like, it was like really arm punches, and I felt like he was saying like that, just like wasn't a lot of umph to it.
Did you see Derek James' interview after the fight?
Nah.
Oh, he crushed Saunders. He was like, Saunders ain't even show up. He said,
What
so
else
he
he
was
say?
like, what was that? He said Saunders did not show up. And he was talking about Saunders' punch variety also, which I was shocked. Like, I thought Saunders was a master boxer. He was basically throwing the same type of jab the entire fight. He
Right.
wasn't changing no eye levels. It was
But,
it
but
was
the
like he was
thing
just there to
is,
sell his belt.
Do the Mike
yeah.
Tyson voice, Jay. Do the Mike Tyson voice.
I mean, let me tell you something. Man, listen. Let me tell you something about Billy Joe Saunders, right? Billy Joe Saunders was confident going into the fight, but everybody got a plan until they get hit in the face. And once he got hit in the face, he broke down, man. He was a punk. He was a punk, man. You know what I'm saying?
There you have it.
Oh man, like you seen that from Derek James said it, like Edgar Berlanga said it, like Billy Joe Saunders just didn't have it, man. You know, and going to what you were saying there, Matt, as far as like this overall so-called boxing skill from Billy Joe Saunders. It looks like boxing skill when you go up against guys that aren't necessarily at your level.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody kind of like is pointing to him against David Lemieux. And why are people forgetting that David Lemieux really wasn't that much of I wouldn't even say he was very good. I'm just going to put it out there.
He's just a power puncher.
He's just a power puncher. So that's why, like, when I come up with the constant criticism of Gennadievich Golovkin, I said there was a specific reason why he chose to fight David Lemieux right off the rip instead of Andy Lee or, anyone else there that was within middleweight at the top of the middleweight division. When he chose to have a unification fight, he chose David Lemieux, who went 12 rounds with Hassan Ndam. Come on. Like, nah, like David Lemieux is just not. Nah, you just can't. See him being anywhere near an elite level, and so you talk about Billy Joe Saunders' boxing skill or his footwork or anything like that. One, like I said, it was against David Lemieux, and two, it was at 160 pounds, not at 168. So I want to know, what did Billy Joe Saunders do at 168 pounds that said that he had that type of boxing skill and that type of movement at super middleweight that had him have some type of a chance against Canelo Alvarez? No
Nothing.
one could come up with Nobody could come
Nothing.
up with anything. So
He got rocked by She-Fat Asufi. Let's not forget that.
like, come on, man. Like, that's why I was like, yo, you. I think, yeah, that's why I think that plan for him to fight Canelo was pretty much in the works. Not that long after Canelo had his fight with Callum Smith, you know. Um, they just, put him in some stay busy fight against Martin Murray. It just let him, go through the motions, just had him secure his spot, and that was it, you know. But he doesn't have much of a shot. And like I told Mike and World Rank earlier, there's only one fighter out there that I feel has any close proximity to making it a 50-50 fight against Canelo Alvarez. And his name is Artur Beterbiev.
I don't
And
see that.
So you think Arthur better be if chances are better than Jamal
Jamal
Charlo?
Charlo, yes.
Jamal,
Yes.
give explanation, please.
At least with Beterbiev, he would have something that Canelo would respect. I don't see it in Jamal Charlo.
Did you watch Jamal Charlo his last few fights?
Yeah, and that's at 160 pounds. Okay. If once he goes up to 168, will he have that same type of movement? I don't think so. Will he have the
How old is
ability
Beterbiev?
to will he have the ability to deal with a sharp counterpuncher like Canelo? I don't know about all that.
How old is Beterbiev?
Probably
Beterbiev,
35.
yeah, about 35, maybe about 35.
Because he was on that. You know how the Eastern
Yeah,
Europeans
36.
are. They like to beat up on junior high school kids for like 3 Olympic cycles. He was one of
Listen,
those too.
man. I But I would like that fight with Canelo and Beterbiev to happen next year. But I want Beterbiev to have two fights in particular before May of next year. Of course, against Joe Smith Jr. and against Dimitri Bivol. So you would have undisputed versus undisputed there at 175, and Canelo will move up to 175 to go up against Archer Beterbiev.
That'll be pretty cool.
Yeah, that'd be
If
a hell of a legacy fight. Like,
if
I
he
mean,
could
he
be
didn't already
undisputed.
cemented his legacy, but that'd be pretty dope.
And I know that Canelo, his plan is to fight for another 7 years, but if he goes ahead, he has his fight with Caleb Plant. He beats Caleb Plant, becomes undisputed super middleweight champion. Then Archer Beterbiev goes ahead and takes out Joe Smith Jr. and beats Dimitri Bivol. Dimitri Bivol, man. And beats Dimitri Bivol and becomes undisputed champion at 175. You would have undisputed versus undisputed. Like, I don't see anything else that Canelo could basically do at that point.
Well, you don't think that maybe if Jamal tries to fight the other champions at 160, that might entice Canelo to come back down.
You mean after Canelo lets the belts go, after he unified and dispersed the belts?
I don't think he's gonna let the belts go. I think he'll just go down and wait to fight the one off against the undisputed guy at 160.
I don't have much hope at 160 for it to ever be undisputed. If it hasn't happened, if it didn't happen when Mister All the Belts was claiming that he was trying to go after him, if it didn't happen then, I don't think it's gonna happen now. It's almost like I don't have much hope for the 160-pound division. Like, you got all these guys right there. You mean to tell me you can't have any type of these unification fights? And the only unification fight that people are talking about is probably the worst unification fight that y'all could make. Oh,
Yep.
my God. Oh.
Which is what?
Triple G versus Murata.
Oh. Who?
Exactly. The Japan's guy.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I mean, that's just horrible, man. I can't take it. It's almost like looking like 160-pound division right now is looking like 168 was before you had Canelo come up there. Oh,
Yeah, but that's
man.
my whole thing. Is Jamal Charlo not a big enough name to start belt collecting like Canelo did at 168? You're telling me he can't get the Andrade fight? He can't get the Murata fight? He can't, maybe if he has all three belts, get Triple G to get off his ass and fight somebody?
I don't think so.
Nope.
And I think the goal is, other than heavyweight and Canelo, because he's the cash cow, the goal is to have 4 different champions in each division from different promoters. I don't think there's any nowadays. There's no way that they really want these guys to unify unless you like money, or you the heavyweight champ or Canelo. Other than that, they trying to divide these belts up and have each promoter have one. If you look at every division and you look at the champions, all of them basically from different promoters, and they don't really intertwine with each other.
I don't know. Top Rank got the 140 kind of sold up.
But that's about it. But the World Bob Organization, they got.
Well, Top Rank got 140 sold up because they signed Josh Taylor after he got his belts. It's not like they had him and then they were cleaning up the division. No, he won the belts and then they signed him afterwards.
They had the belt sold up with Terrence Crawford fighting the poor competition.
Yeah, but what happened when it was time for Regis Prograis to come up? Terrence Crawford moved up to 147.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And
I've never understood that. Why do people become undisputed then just let their belts go? Nobody.
So somebody can't. So somebody can't do a what's the dude who got knocked out in the last round and he was winning the fight? His chin, dark skinned guy.
Meldrick Taylor?
No.
Jermaine Taylor?
Jermaine Taylor, thank you. Didn't he win undisputed off of somebody like that?
He won off the Hopkins off of a decision where you had Lou DiBella cheering more than anybody in that particular ring when that decision came down.
But look how long Hopkins was undisputed for. I don't understand why you wouldn't want to be undisputed and just lord over a division.
What I'm saying is people let the belts go so somebody can't come and beat them and then have that undisputed title off of just one fight.
That's just stupid.
And plus, most sanctioning bodies don't allow them to do that. They'll give them one. They might give them one fight, and then they like, you got to defend with ours, and then the other one saying you got to defend mine, and then they got to like when 154 Charlo, when he unified with Castillo or Castellano,
Castaño.
yeah, he's gonna vacate some of them belts. I can assure you of that. Somebody's gonna take a belt, or he's gonna have to vacate or something because they won't. They're not gonna allow that.
Yeah, because of course you got the whole thing with the IBF be tripping because after Jamel Charlo beat Jason Rosario, you really hadn't had no IBF mandatory, and nobody really knows much about the IBF mandatory there at 154
No,
pounds.
he got
So,
a mandatory.
that Murtazalia?
Yeah, you remember the mandatory, they actually paid him to step aside so Charlo could become undisputed. And they actually have been putting him on PBC undercards as part of the deal to step aside. So once Charlo becomes undisputed, he's gonna be the first one that gets that first crack at Charlo.
Oh, well, good for the IBF in that particular part because you barely hear them actually trying to do it.
Who want to make a bet that fight don't happen?
Say it again.
Who want to make a bet that fight won't happen?
Uh,
Who will bet me to say that fight will happen? Because I'm betting that fight won't happen.
You think Al Heyman gonna screw over Edge's Climax?
He's going either Charlo's gonna move up or somebody else gonna move up. He's not gonna fight. They're not gonna fight somebody outside of PBC unified.
Honestly, I would be very disappointed if Charlo moves up after he becomes undisputed because there is still so much work for him at 154. You still got Lubin if he could beat Rosario. You still got Fundora. You still got Zoo, which could be a huge mega fight in Australia.
Oh,
like
man.
there's a lot of work for Charlo where he could make a lot of money.
Nobody
Charlo versus Zoo would probably be his most lucrative fight that he'll have in his career.
Right.
Charlo who?
Tim Zoo.
Oh, nobody gonna fight Fundora.
No, Fundora gonna get his shot.
Now Fedora might get his shot because he's with PBC. But those Horn and all those, I mean not Horn, but Zoo and all those guys, they're gonna get some vacant belts. The same thing with Taylor and Ramirez. They got that Catterall dude waiting. He's not going. Imagine Josh Taylor and Ramirez, the winner of that fighting Catterall.
Well, I think Taylor versus Catterall will actually be a decent sized event in the UK, and it could be like a homecoming basically for Josh Taylor.
Yeah, that's fair. Ramirez, when he definitely ain't fighting.
Nah.
Yeah, it definitely ain't happening. But I mean, yeah, the whole thing with these belts and undisputed and trying to defend under undisputed, like is I don't know why it's so difficult right now for these fighters to do it. Just go ahead and make that joint happen, man. And that's why I would like to see there with Canelo, because come after September this year, we get that thing over Caleb Plant, then he'll have that win. And my thing is, you still have fights that could happen at 168 pounds with the guy by the name of David Benavidez that's still out there that he could have a fight with at 168. If he don't have his fight with, Artur Beterbiev. So, yeah, my thing with the undisputed titles, man, like if you're gonna go for undisputed, it's one thing to go for undisputed, but what's the point if you're not gonna defend the undisputed title?
Yeah, I just don't get that mentality.
So
welcome to 2000, whatever year this is.
Yeah, 2021, 2020, 2019, it's not much different, You still have, the same thing going on in reference to, unifying and being undisputed, in that instance.
If I'm undisputed, I wanna whoop everybody's ass. I'm lording over that division for a long time.
But most people think that when they get undisputed, they done already did the work. So Crawford probably thought when he became undisputed, he did all the work. It was nobody else in that division that was worth anything to to fight. So I'm gonna move up.
It was already nobody worth anything.
That's fair. That's fair too.
Yeah, and the thing is, they already had plans for Crawford. All he had to do was just say, "Okay, I'm undisputed at 140." He wanted to move up to 147 for at least a year, before his opportunity to become undisputed. But that just is one thing, like a feather on his cap at that particular point. So that is what that is.
Yeah, but
Um,
how good would Terrence Crawford's resume look if he would have stayed at 140? It's not like he has a problem staying in shape. He probably could have still been making 140. Now, imagine if he was the guy that was fighting Baranchik and Zepeda and Pedraza and Taylor and Prograis and Ramirez and just beating the hell out of these dudes.
But
We would be looking at Terrence Crawford as an all-time great.
no, we wouldn't. Though, like those guys aren't that good either. They're okay, but they're not. They're not Danny Garcia. They're not Tim Bradley at 140.
And those guys, when he was they wasn't around, so he not looking at let me wait for.
Prograis was next. Prograis was next in line. He was coming up.
I don't know if Prograis was a big enough name to stay around at that time.
Yeah, but
Prograis even
just
ain't that good to me now. He's okay. Like watching his fights, he alright, but like Prograis okay. He ain't Danny Garcia even now.
Can we even? I don't even know who Prograis beat. Who he beat? Ndongo? He beat Ndongo, right?
Indongo, which
Yeah.
ain't that fucking good.
I mean, I see the point of staying around. Even Jermaine Taylor, when he took the titles from Hopkins, they started stripping immediately. So when he fought Pavlik, I don't even think he had all the belts.
yeah, but that was years ago. I feel like these sanctioning bodies now are more willing to work together and put the belts in rotation. As long as you're a decent draw.
mm. And I was looking up the thing there for Progress, man. Okay, Indongo, Joel Diaz, Terry Flanagan, Carl Relic. That's his. That's his basically his resume at 140.
Skill wise, is he like how good is he skill wise to y'all? Like tell me a fighter he's better than. A
Well,
semi-known fighter.
he might be the second best guy at 140 if he could make 140.
Is that saying much at 140? Like who? I
140 is
personally
good.
don't.
He's better than Broner at 140. When Broner was at 140.
Broner ain't that good though.
Okay.
That's a good point. I'm not trying to diminish that, but Broner's not a
And
good
are
one.
we really sure that Taylor beat Prograis?
I wasn't.
I
I
thought it
wasn't.
was even fight. I ain't, it wasn't either way. It would have been okay.
Somebody tell me I'm wrong in saying that Prograis is okay, but ain't like that good.
I mean, he's one of the best in the division. That's all you can really ask for from a fighter. How good the division is, we don't know, but he's one of the three best guys in it.
I mean, that's all you can pretty much say at this point, for Regis Progress, man.
I
I
still
mean,
question
I
his
know.
chin though. I still think it's something about. I don't know about his chin. I still think might be a chin issue with him.
No, I
His
mean,
chin, I wouldn't say his chin. I think a bigger issue for Prograis is his dedication to the sport. He's always struggling with weight.
yeah,
Like this dude, instead of uh getting a real workout and a boxing style workout, this motherfucker is busy wrestling alligators. That's not boxing workouts.
He wrestled alligators for real.
Yes.
And another thing, whoever he's promoted by, they not pushing him like he should. Like after that Taylor fight, he should have got something really big. Now he's on Thriller undercards and
Well, because you have to remember he left his promoter. He was with Lou DiBella,
yeah.
and he decided to part ways with him. So now he's basically a free agent. He had the PBC deal, but for some reason he decided to move on after one fight, and now he's in limbo. Now he's calling out Adrian Broner on the internet. Why are you calling out Broner? There's a lot of guys at PBC that he can fight besides Broner that'll give him some work. Why does he want to fight Broner of all people?
He could fight Robert Easter Jr. at 140 pounds.
Oh, I don't care about Robert Easter. Come
I
on,
know
man.
you don't.
Who gives a shit about Robert Easter?
You're horrible, man.
Boy, man, he need to fight at 147 because he can't make weight anyway.
Yeah, that's the thing with Progress. He can't make weight at no 140. So I mean,
Well, he
that's
needs to get
that.
a meaningful fight.
All right.
I'm forgetting about him.
All right. I have man, I gotta figure this thing out. So next weekend we got Luis Neri versus Brandon Figueroa.
Let's go.
Now that is coming up in Carson, California. So I guess there's going to be a crowd for this particular fight. So don't just watch the fight in the ring, but watch out for fights outside of the ring. This is just, it's horrible. But here's my thing. Man, I probably gotta check on, I guess, the email blast or whatever it is, because on PBC you don't even see what the co-feature bout is, man. Like, come on, man.
You talking about for this fight?
Yeah.
This is a good card, man.
Like, how come they ain't promoting it on their own daggone website, man?
Well, you gotta talk to PBC about that, but
Well,
this
I
is a
gotta
good
talk
card. This is
to
actually one of their better cards.
man, I gotta see. Let's see who else they got. Okay,
They got
yeah. So
Xavier
they got Danny
Martinez.
Roman against Ricardo Espinoza in the co-main, and they got Xavier Martinez against Juan Carlos Burgos. Damn, this shit don't start until 10 o'clock. God damn.
Because they try to
they
cater
on the West
to
Coast.
the Mexicans.
Yeah.
Man, that's a garbage card, man.
You think so?
You talking about Juan Carlos Burgos? Ain't he like 57?
I think this is a good card, man.
Man, he just washed by who he for? Haney? Haney just, man, he like 50 years old, man.
He did.
I think this is a good card, man.
And who is Espinoza? I never even heard of that dude. I know who Roman is. Who is Espinoza?
Ricardo Espinoza.
Well, just because you never heard of somebody does not mean that they're not going to give us a good fight.
Hey, Matt, you know who that is?
No.
My point exactly.
I don't know who it is, so they must not be good.
Well, a lot of fighters must not be good to you, there, Mike.
Jeez, man, Haney fought Juan Carlos Burgos in 2018. God damn, boy, man. Mini Burgos is his nickname. Mini Burgos.
I guarantee you that this card is going to be action-packed.
Oh boy, man. Yeah, this is wait, that's a WBA super featherweight title eliminator? What?
Yeah, why not?
Oh my
Why not?
God.
Man, Burgos ain't do nothing since 2008, man.
It's all right.
Dang, I mean, he's losing to Mikey Garcia. Oh man.
It's all right.
Oh jeez, man. Oh man. Hey,
I
maybe
guarantee
Danny
you it's
Roman
going to be
will have a better
people.
performance this time around in
I
comparison
bet every
to his
fight
last
ends with a knockout.
Yeah, because the B-side's trash.
No, but it's going to be exciting. Like, Well, like, what do you guys want from these boxing matches, man? Like, I saw the sweet science up and close and personal yesterday with that French guy versus the British
Sissoko
guy.
versus Conway.
Yeah, it was trash. I don't like the sweet science. I want to see people getting their heads knocked off.
That may be true, but let's have a competitive fight. Let's have it not one way. You know what I'm saying? Not one
But
way.
how do you know it's not going to be competitive? If PBC has shown us anything, I think we should, whenever PBC announces a card, we should just shut up and see how it goes. Because every time PBC does a card, somehow these fights turn out better than we expected them to turn out. At least the ones on Showtime. The ones on Fox, fuck them. You know, like the ones on Fox are always garbage, even though that's going to change too. Because
Okay,
according to my
okay.
man Jake Donovan, they got some heat coming soon that they're going to announce. But the PBC cards on Showtime have been excellent for the last year.
And you know the Showtime schedule that they have is yeah, it's really good. But going back to this thing here for this particular card coming up, you know, for next Saturday, right? And they say like that undercard is trash. All right, so let's compare that thing with Neri versus Figueroa as the main event to a card that's going to happen the following week. Josh Taylor versus Jose Carlos Ramirez for the undisputed super lightweight title. Okay, cool. Here are the fights under that.
Nah, this card is trash.
What?
Read this one.
What?
Jose Cepeda
That's a good fight.
versus Hank Lundy.
Oh no,
Are
that's
you
not
fucking kidding me?
Oh no, that's not a good fight. No, what's the other? What's the other? It's another fight on there that's a good fight.
Elvis Rodriguez versus Kenneth Sims Jr.
Nah, that's trash. What's the other? It's another one too. Give me one more. The next one I know is a good fight.
I don't know, but another one.
That's not the one with that's not the one with Pedraza and Rodriguez.
No, no, not that one.
Oh, okay. That's no, that must be on a Josh. That's the Josh Taylor card, right?
That's the Josh Taylor card.
Oh man, they done switched up the fights on me.
Sounds like world rank fell for the banana in the tailpipe.
Oh boy. Oh, that's just yeah, that's just oh my goodness, because they got this whole thing with the that Ramirez Taylor and then the Stevenson Nakatila. Oh my god.
Man, that's garbage.
Yeah, Pedraza's fighting on the Puerto Rican card.
Against Hammer Hands, right?
Against Julian Rodriguez.
Okay, that's not the same. Okay.
Oh,
But that's not until June.
That must be a whole different thing because they got
that's the Puerto Rican weekend card where Shakur's gonna fight Nakatila.
Oh, okay, so then he's part of that one. Oh, jeez, man.
Man, I hope Nakatila knocks this dude head off, man. I can't stand that motherfucker Shakur, man. I swear for God.
Oh my God, just keep, man. They should just hold him on ice so that we could at least get a unification. Could we get a unification fight at super featherweight? Could we at least get that? Because listen, Jamel Herring does want to go ahead and face Oscar Valdez, so let's just go ahead and have that fight this year, and just put Shakur Stevenson in some other fight, that you could have at super featherweight. let him fight let him fight someone else there at 130 pounds, man. In the meantime, man, like, don't call on no mandatory at this particular point when you could have a unification.
The only reason why Shakur is so eager to fight Herring is because he thinks that Herring is gonna be easy to beat. He wasn't this eager to fight Josh Warrington. He wasn't this eager to fight Emmanuel Navarrete when Navarrete moved up to 126. But now that he found somebody who he think is food, now all of a sudden he eager. Get out of here with this guy, man. I don't respect
Oh
that.
man. Good. Let him go ahead and face Abraham Nova after this fight. How about that?
Yeah. Or how about he give Joet Gonzalez a rematch?
I guess that will be the case, man. Because yeah, I mean, we they gotta have some things shaking there at 130 pounds, and you still have the IBF title vacant at 130 pounds too. So that's, my goodness, man. But yo, this is like what about name a 2 hour and 30 minute podcast, man. This went in for this particular episode as we're gonna be transitioning over to the 7th season of the Boxing Source Radio Show. This has been 6 seasons complete already. God damn, boy.
How many of these seasons has it been since Fury versus Joshua was announced?
Man, it's only been within a half season, man. What are you talking about?
Every week that fight finalized.
Oh man. But yeah, we'll have another conversation going down, man, and we'll have this thing available as always on iTunes or whatever you use for podcasts, man. But big thanks to all of the contributors to the Boxing Source Radio Show, World Rank, Mike Grady, Mr. Matthew Brown, of course, Terrell from Tampa as a contributor, and the guests that have been part of this podcast over the past season, man. And we gonna keep it going, man. Of course, yo, because this is what we do. We just talk boxing. You really, like I said, this is according to sources, but this is actuality the longest running boxing podcast in existence. You can look it up. Look it up. That's what it is. And if anyone disputes it, I could bring the receipts up. With that being said, that's the conclusion of this particular episode of the Boxing Source Radio Show. We will get back at it next week. And like I say at the end of every show, folks, the point of boxing is to hit and not get hit like how Billy Joe Saunders got hit with that uppercut from Canelo Alvarez. None to stay in the trade. On that note, folks, I'm out. Have a
Mob
good evening,
Squad,
everybody.
baby.